The blood on Josephine Rothwell's knuckles had barely dried when her father's hand connected with her cheek, sending her stumbling backward into the dusty parlor of their Julesburg home. It was August 1878, and the scorching Colorado sun beat down mercilessly on the small town that sat along the South Platte River. But the heat inside the Rothwell house burned hotter still. "You broke Marcus Whitfield's nose!" her father roared, his face purple with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? His father owns half the cattle operations in this county." Josephine steadied herself against the wall, tasting copper in her mouth. Her younger sister Lily huddled in the corner, tears streaming down her 13-year-old face, her dress torn at the shoulder where Marcus had grabbed her behind the general store. The 17-year-old boy had cornered Lily with two of his friends, their intentions clear as mountain water, and Josephine had heard her sister's screams from inside the store where she'd been purchasing flour. "He put his hands on Lily," Josephine said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her legs. "He was going to hurt her. They were all going to hurt her. That's no concern of yours." Her father advanced on her again, and Josephine could smell the whiskey on his breath. Ever since her mother had died 2 years ago from consumption, he'd been drowning himself in drink and debt. Marcus says she was being friendly with them, says she wanted the attention. "That's a lie," Lily sobbed. "I didn't do anything, Papa. I just wanted to get the ribbon Mama used to wear, the one at the store. Marcus grabbed me and said awful things. Josephine saved me." Their father rounded on Lily, and Josephine immediately stepped between them. At 22 years old, she'd been running this household since her mother's death, keeping Lily safe, managing what little money they had, and trying to maintain some semblance of dignity in a town that seemed determined to grind them into dust. "Don't you dare touch her," Josephine warned, her green eyes flashing. She was tall for a woman, nearly 5'8", with dark auburn hair that fell in waves down her back, and a spine that refused to bend no matter how many times life tried to break it. "You've ruined us," her father spat. "Virgil Whitfield came to see me at the saloon. Said his boy's face is all swollen, might be broken permanent. He's demanding restitution, money we don't have, because of you and your temper." "Because I defended my sister from being assaulted by his spoiled, vicious son," Josephine corrected. "If there's any justice in this town, Marcus should be the one answering for what he tried to do." Her father laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. "Justice? For the likes of us? Against the Whitfields? You stupid girl. We're barely hanging on as it is. The bank's threatening to take the house. I owe money all over town. The Whitfields were my last hope for a loan to keep us afloat, and you've destroyed that." He moved to his room and emerged moments later with a worn leather satchel, which he threw at Josephine's feet. "Pack your things. You've got until sundown to get out of my house. Out of Julesburg. I won't have you bringing any more trouble down on this family." Josephine stared at him, feeling the floor drop out from beneath her. "You're casting me out? For protecting Lily?" "I'm doing what I have to do to survive," her father said, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. "Virgil Whitfield made it clear. Either you go, or he'll make sure we lose everything. The house, the land, everything. At least with you gone, I can try to make amends. Maybe find Lily a suitable husband who can provide for her." "She's 13 years old," Josephine protested. "She'll be 14 soon enough, old enough to marry in a year or two, if I can find someone willing to take her despite her sister's reputation." Lily ran to Josephine, wrapping her arms around her waist. "Don't go, Josie. Please don't leave me." Josephine held her sister tight, her heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. "I don't have a choice, little bird." She'd called Lily that since she was born, small and delicate as a baby sparrow. "But I promise you, I'll find a way to come back for you. I'll write to you, I'll make something of myself, and I'll come back." "Pretty words won't change reality," her father said. "You need to go, now, before Virgil changes his mind and comes after us with the sheriff." "The sheriff?" Ben Crawford was in Virgil Whitfield's pocket, had been for years. There would be no help from that quarter. Josephine realized with crystalline clarity that her father was right about one thing. She had no power here, no recourse, no way to fight men who controlled everything. She packed quickly, her hands shaking as she folded the few dresses she owned, her mother's silver hairbrush, a daguerreotype of her family taken before her mother got sick. Lily helped her, both of them crying silently. When the satchel was full, Josephine counted the money she'd been saving in a tin under her mattress. $47. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the Colorado sky in shades of orange and gold, Josephine stood on the porch of the only home she'd ever known. Lily clung to her one last time. "Be strong," Josephine whispered into her sister's hair. "Remember what Mama taught us. You're smart and you're good. Don't let Papa or anyone else tell you different." "I love you, Josie," Lily sobbed. "I love you too, little bird, more than anything in this world." Then Josephine turned and walked down the dusty road that led out of Julesburg, her satchel over her shoulder, her heart left behind in pieces. She didn't look back. If she did, she knew she'd never be able to leave. The town was small enough that word of her banishment had already spread. People she'd known her whole life watched from windows and doorways as she passed, their faces ranging from pity to satisfaction. Mrs. Henderson from the Mercantile looked away quickly. The blacksmith's son, who'd once asked to court her, studied his boots. At the edge of town, near the last building before the road opened into prairie, a group of young men loitered outside the saloon. Marcus Whitfield stood among them, his nose swollen and purple, both eyes blackened. He said something to his friends, and they all laughed. Josephine kept walking, her head high. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The road stretched out before her, dusty and uncertain. She had no destination in mind, only a vague plan to head west toward the mining camps where she'd heard women could find work cooking or cleaning. It wasn't much, but it was something. She had maybe 2 hours of daylight left, and she wanted to put as much distance between herself and Julesburg as possible before night fell. She'd been walking for about an hour, the town now just a smudge on the horizon behind her, when she heard hoofbeats approaching from ahead. 3 riders appeared, moving at an easy trot. Josephine stepped to the side of the road, keeping her eyes down. Lone women on deserted roads were vulnerable in ways she didn't want to contemplate. The riders slowed as they approached. She could feel their eyes on her, but kept walking. "Miss," one of them called out, "you all right out here by yourself?" Against her better judgment, Josephine looked up. 3 cowboys sat astride their horses, all of them dusty from long riding. The one who'd spoken was younger than the others, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that were an unusual shade of golden brown. He sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone who'd been born in the saddle, but his face held genuine concern rather than the predatory interest she'd feared. "I'm fine, thank you," she said, her voice cool and dismissive. She'd learned long ago that engaging with strange men rarely ended well for women. "You're a fair piece from town to be walking alone," the man continued. He had a pleasant voice, deep and warm, with a slight drawl that suggested he'd spent time further south. "And the sun's going down. There's no settlements for another 15 miles at least." "I'm aware," Josephine said. "Thank you for your concern. Good evening." She started walking again, but the riders kept pace with her, their horses moving at a slow walk. The man who'd spoken glanced at his companions, an older grizzled cowboy with a magnificent mustache and a Mexican man with a scarred face and kind eyes. "Miss, I don't mean to be forward," the young man said, "but it's not safe out here after dark. There's been reports of raiders working this area, outlaws picking off travelers. A woman alone wouldn't stand a chance." "Then I suppose I'll have to take my chances," Josephine said sharply. "I don't have many options." Something in her tone must have conveyed her desperation, because the young man's expression shifted from concern to understanding. He dismounted smoothly, landing in the dust beside her. He was tall, she realized, probably 6 feet or more, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of someone who worked hard for a living. His clothes were well worn but clean, and he wore a gun on his hip with the unconscious ease of someone who knew how to use it. "My name's Owen Irwin," he said, extending his hand. "This here's Chuck, and that's Mateo. We work for the Rocking Sea Ranch about 20 miles west of here. We've been up north buying horses, and we're heading home." Josephine looked at his offered hand, but didn't take it. "I'm sure that's all very interesting, Mr. Irwin, but I need to keep moving." "At least let us escort you to the next town," Owen pressed. "It's the decent thing to do. We can't in good conscience leave a lady alone out here." "I'm not a lady," Josephine said bitterly. "I'm just a woman with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. And in my experience, accepting help from strange men comes with strings attached. So, thank you but no." She tried to walk past him, but Owen stepped into her path, not threatening, but definitely blocking her way. His golden brown eyes studied her face, taking in the swelling on her cheek where her father had struck her, the dried blood on her knuckles, the exhaustion and desperation she was trying so hard to hide. "Someone hurt you," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "That's none of your concern." "Maybe not," Owen agreed. "But it seems to me that someone who's been hurt might need help even more than someone who hasn't. And I was raised to help people when they need it." "Why?" Josephine demanded, her voice rising with frustration and fear, and the overwhelming pressure of everything that had happened. "Why would you help me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. What's in it for you?" Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that nearly broke her remaining composure. "Because defenders are worth protecting too." Josephine stared at him. "What?" "Your knuckles are all torn up," Owen observed. "That kind of damage comes from hitting someone hard, probably in the face. But you've got defensive wounds too, see?" He gestured to her arms where bruises were forming. "You were protecting someone or something, fighting against odds that weren't in your favor. That takes courage. And people with courage, people who defend others, they deserve to be defended themselves when they need it." Tears burned in Josephine's eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not all of it," Owen conceded, "but I know what I see. And what I see is a woman who fought for something important and paid a price for it. Now she's alone and afraid and trying to be brave enough for 10 people. I'd like to help, if you'll let me. No strings, just basic human decency." From his horse, Chuck called down, "Owen's good people, miss. So's Mateo, and so am I. We ain't gonna hurt you, but we would sleep better tonight knowing you weren't out here alone with the night coming on and trouble about." Josephine looked between the three men. Every instinct she had screamed at her to refuse, to keep her independence, to not owe anyone anything. But she was so tired, tired of fighting, tired of being strong, tired of having no one on her side. And there was something in Owen Irwin's eyes that made her want to trust him, even though she knew better. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked carefully. "We camp a few miles up the road when we travel this route," Owen said. "There's a spot with water and cover. You could spend the night there, safe. Tomorrow we could take you on to the next town, or you could come to the ranch with us. The owner, Mrs. Isabel Donnelly, she's always looking for help. We lost our cook last month when he decided to try his luck in the gold fields. Position's still open if you're interested. Pays $30 a month plus room and board." $30 a month. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work and a place to stay. More than she'd hoped for when she left Julesburg. "And if I'm not interested," Josephine asked, "if I just want to move on?" "Then we'll take you wherever you want to go, within reason, and we'll part ways," Owen said simply. "Your choice, miss, but it's getting dark fast, and you need somewhere safe for the night at minimum." Josephine looked at the horizon where the sun was sinking rapidly. She thought of raiders and outlaws and wild animals and 1,000 other dangers. She thought of Lily back in Julesburg, needing her to survive so she could keep her promise to come back. She thought of her mother, who'd always said that pride was fine, but survival was better. "All right," she said finally. "I'll accept your help, for tonight. Tomorrow we can discuss the rest." Relief flashed across Owen's face. "Thank you. I know that wasn't easy." He moved to his horse and swung back into the saddle with fluid grace, then extended his arm down to her. "You can ride with me. Save your feet." Josephine hesitated, then took his hand. His grip was warm and strong as he pulled her up behind him, with surprising ease. She settled onto the horse's back, acutely aware of how close she was to Owen, how she had to hold on to him to stay balanced. "Ready?" he asked over his shoulder. "As I'll ever be," Josephine muttered. They rode west as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of crimson and purple. The horse's gait was smooth, and Owen's back was solid against her hands where she gripped his shirt. She could feel the heat of him, even through the fabric, could smell leather and horse and something else, something clean and distinctly masculine. It had been so long since she'd been close to anyone besides Lily that the proximity was almost overwhelming. The other two riders, Chuck and Mateo, flanked them on either side. They didn't talk much, but their presence was somehow comforting. These were men who rode together often, who trusted each other, who worked as a team. There was something reassuring about that. "So, what brings you boys up this way?" Josephine asked, more to fill the silence than from real curiosity. "Buying horses, like I said," Owen replied. "There's a crow trader up north who breeds some of the finest horses in Colorado. Mrs. Donnelly sends us up twice a year to see what he's got. This time, we got 8 new horses, all good stock. Left them at a way station about 10 miles back to rest before we bring them home." "The Rocking Eye Ranch," Josephine said, remembering. "I've heard of it. One of the bigger operations around here. Second biggest in the county," Chuck put in proudly. "Mrs. Donnelly runs a tight ship, fair but firm. Good woman to work for. Her husband passed 5 years back," Owen added. "She's been running the place herself since then. Does a better job than most men would, if you ask me. She's not afraid of hard work, and she doesn't tolerate laziness or cruelty. Treats everyone who works for her with respect as long as they earn it." "Sounds too good to be true," Josephine said skeptically. "I felt the same way when I signed on 2 years ago," Owen admitted. "But it's held up. Mrs. Donnelly's the real deal." They rode in companionable silence for a while longer, until they reached a small grove of cottonwood trees clustered around a spring. The last light of day was fading fast, but there was enough to see that this was indeed a good camping spot. The trees provided shelter, and the spring meant fresh water. Chuck and Mateo set about making camp with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done this 1,000 times before. Owen dismounted and helped Josephine down. Her legs were shaky after the ride, and she stumbled slightly. His hand shot out to steady her, gentle but sure. "Thank you," she murmured, embarrassed. "Nothing to thank me for," Owen said. "Why don't you sit and rest? We'll have a fire going in a minute, and Chuck makes coffee strong enough to wake the dead." "I can help," Josephine protested. "I don't want to be useless." "You're not useless," Owen said firmly. "You're exhausted, and you've had what I'm guessing was a very bad day. Let us take care of things tonight. Tomorrow you can pull your weight if you want to." There was no condescension in his voice, just genuine kindness. Josephine found herself nodding and sinking down onto a fallen log near where Chuck was building a fire. Within minutes, flames were crackling cheerfully, and coffee was brewing in a battered pot. Mateo produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags, not fancy but filling. As they ate, Owen settled on the log beside Josephine, careful to keep a respectful distance between them. The fire cast dancing shadows across his face, highlighting strong cheekbones and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He really was quite handsome, she realized, in a rugged, weathered way. Not pretty like some of the town boys back in Julesburg, but striking, memorable. "So," he said quietly, his voice pitched so only she could hear under Chuck and Mateo's conversation. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to, but if you need someone to listen, I'm here." Josephine stared into the fire, watching the flames leap and dance. Part of her wanted to keep everything locked inside, to maintain her pride and independence. But another part, the part that was scared and hurt and desperately alone, wanted to talk, wanted to share the burden with someone who seemed willing to carry it. "My sister," she said finally. "She's 13. 3 boys cornered her in town. They were going to hurt her, badly. I stopped them." Owen's jaw tightened. "Good." "The ringleader was the son of the most powerful man in Julesburg," Josephine continued. "I broke his nose. Black in both his eyes. He's lucky that's all I did to him." "Still sounds like he got off easy," Owen said darkly. "His father came to my father and gave him an ultimatum. Either I leave town permanently, or they'd destroy us. Take our house, our land, everything. My father is already drowning in debt and whiskey. He didn't even hesitate. He threw me out before the sun set." She could hear the bitterness in her own voice, the pain of that betrayal. Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your father's a coward and a fool." Josephine looked at him in surprise. "That's my father you're talking about?" "I know," Owen said. "Doesn't make it less true. A real man protects his family, all of his family. He doesn't sacrifice one daughter to save his own hide. And he sure as hell doesn't punish the defender instead of the attackers." "The world doesn't work that way," Josephine said wearily. "Not for people like me, people without power or money or influence." "Maybe not," Owen agreed. "But that doesn't make it right. You did what you had to do to protect your sister. That takes guts. You should be celebrated, not cast out." "Well, I was cast out," Josephine said flatly. "And now I have nothing except $47 and the clothes on my back, and a promise I made to my sister that I'd come back for her someday, though I have no idea how I'll ever keep it." Owen turned to look at her fully. the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "You will keep it," he said with such conviction that she almost believed him. "You're a fighter. I can see it in you. You'll find a way." "You don't know that," Josephine said. "I know you punched out a rich man's son to protect your sister," Owen pointed out. "I know you walked out of your hometown with your head high instead of begging for mercy. I know you're sitting here talking to me instead of falling apart, which is what most people would do after the day you've had. That tells me everything I need to know about your strength." Josephine felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she'd built to hold back the flood of emotions. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them, silent and hot. She turned away quickly, mortified, but Owen didn't move or say anything. He just sat there, a solid presence beside her, letting her cry. When she finally got herself under control, she wiped her face roughly with her sleeve. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." "Nothing inappropriate about tears," Owen said gently. "Sometimes they're the only thing that keeps us sane." Chuck and Mateo had tactfully moved away, tending to the horses and giving them privacy. Josephine was grateful for that. She took a shaky breath and changed the subject. "Tell me about the ranch. What's it like?" Owen seemed to understand she needed a distraction, and he obliged. "It's good land, about 15,000 acres running cattle and horses. Mrs. Donnelly runs about 3,000 head of cattle and breeds horses on the side. We've got maybe 20 men working the place full-time, more during roundup and drives. The main house is sturdy, built of stone and timber. There's a bunkhouse for the hands, a barn, corrals, all the usual buildings." "And Mrs. Donnelly really needs a cook?" Josephine asked. "Desperately," Owen said with a slight grin. "We've been taking turns, and let me tell you, none of us are exactly gifted in that department. Last week, Chuck made stew that was so bad we nearly had a mutiny. One of the younger hands said he'd rather eat his boots." Despite everything, Josephine found herself smiling. "I can cook. My mother taught me before she died. I've been running my father's house for 2 years now." "Then you'd be worth your weight in gold to us," Owen said. "Mrs. Donnelly pays fair, and the work's steady. You'd have your own room in the main house, 3 meals a day for yourself, plus cooking for the hands. They eat breakfast before dawn, and dinner after the workday's done. Usually about 25 men to feed." "That's a lot of cooking," Josephine said, but her mind was already racing ahead. A job, a place to stay, $30 a month that she could save toward getting Lily out of Julesburg. It was more than she dared hope for. "It is," Owen agreed, "but you'd have help. There's a woman named Rosa who does laundry and cleaning. She'd probably help with prep work if you asked. And the men are expected to clean up after themselves, bring in wood for the stove, that kind of thing." "What's the catch?" Josephine asked suspiciously. "There's always a catch." Owen met her eyes steadily. "No catch. You do the work, you get paid. Mrs. Donnelly doesn't play games. Only thing I can think of that might be difficult is that the ranch is isolated. Town's about 15 miles away, and we only go in for supplies once every few weeks. Some people find that lonely." "Lonely sounds good right about now," Josephine said quietly. "Better than being somewhere people know my shame." "There's no shame in defending your sister," Owen said firmly. "Anyone at the Rocking, I would tell you the same." They talked more as the night deepened around them, the conversation flowing easier than Josephine would have expected. Owen told her about growing up in Texas, about how he'd left home at 18 to make his own way, and had drifted north through Kansas and eventually into Colorado. He talked about working various ranches, learning the cattle business from the ground up, before landing at the Rocking Eye 2 years ago. "I like it there," he said simply. "Feels like home in a way nowhere else ever has." Josephine found herself telling him more about Lily, about their mother who died too young, about the suffocating feeling of watching her father drink himself into oblivion while she tried to hold everything together. She didn't mean to share so much, but Owen listened without judgment, asking questions that showed he was really paying attention, not just making polite noises. Eventually, Chuck came over and announced it was time to bed down. They'd set up 2 bedrolls by the fire and hung a blanket between the trees to give Josephine some privacy. "You take those 2, Chuck said, gesturing to the bedrolls behind the blanket. "We'll sleep on the other side. You holler if you need anything, all right?" "Thank you," Josephine said, overwhelmed by their consideration. She lay down on the bedroll, which was surprisingly comfortable, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. The sounds of the prairie at night surrounded her, insects singing, wind rustling through the cottonwood leaves, the occasional call of a night bird. She should have been terrified, sleeping outside with 3 strange men nearby, but somehow she felt safer than she had in months. On the other side of the blanket, she could hear the men settling in. Their voices were low murmurs, too quiet to make out words. Then Owen's voice, a bit louder, said, "Good night, Miss Josephine." "Good night," she called back. "And thank you, all of you, for everything." "Our pleasure, miss," Chuck replied. "Sleep well." Josephine closed her eyes, expecting to lie awake for hours replaying the nightmare of the day. Instead, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to the smell of coffee and the gray light of pre-dawn. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure where she was, then memory flooded back. She sat up quickly, her heart pounding, but everything was quiet and peaceful. The fire had been rebuilt and coffee was heating. Mateo was tending to it, while Chuck and Owen were saddling the horses. Owen glanced over and saw her stirring. "Morning," he called. "Coffee's almost ready. We'll ride out as soon as you're ready." Josephine stood and folded the blankets, her muscles stiff from the hard ground and the previous day's stress. She moved away into the trees for a few minutes of privacy, then returned to the fire, where Mateo handed her a tin cup of steaming coffee. "Thank you," she said, wrapping her hands around the cup's warmth, even though the morning was already heating up. They drank their coffee and ate more jerky in companionable silence. The men moved with quiet efficiency, packing up the camp and preparing to ride. Within half an hour, they were mounted and moving west toward the ranch. Josephine rode behind Owen again, and as the sun rose higher and painted the grasslands gold, she found herself relaxing slightly. The land out here was beautiful in a stark, endless way. Rolling prairie stretched to the horizon, broken occasionally by rocky outcroppings or stands of trees. Hawks circled overhead, and once they saw a small herd of pronghorn in the distance, moving like ghosts across the plains. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Owen said over his shoulder. "It is," Josephine agreed. "I've never been this far from Julesburg, never really been anywhere." "Well, now you're going somewhere," Owen said, "and I think you're going to like it." They stopped at the way station around mid-morning to collect the horses Owen and his companions had purchased. The 8 animals were indeed fine specimens, well-muscled and alert. Mateo and Chuck took charge of them, and they continued on with the new horses trailing behind on lead ropes. It was early afternoon when they crested a rise, and Owen pointed ahead. "There," he said, "the rocking eye." Josephine looked where he indicated and caught her breath. The ranch spread out in the valley below, more extensive than she'd imagined. The main house was indeed stone and timber, 2 stories tall with a wide porch. The barn was enormous, red-painted and solid. Corrals fanned out from it, several filled with horses. Other buildings dotted the landscape, bunkhouse, cookhouse, storage sheds. It looked prosperous and well-maintained. "What do you think?" Owen asked. "It's impressive," Josephine admitted. They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the main house, a woman emerged onto the porch. She was perhaps 50 years old, with silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a face that spoke of strength and intelligence. She wore a split riding skirt and a man's shirt, and she stood with her hands on her hips watching them approach. Owen dismounted and helped Josephine down, then walked over to the porch. "Mrs. Donnelly, we got the horses and made good time." "So I see," the woman said, her sharp eyes moving to Josephine. "And who's this?" "This is Miss Josephine Rothwell," Owen said. "We found her walking alone on the road yesterday evening, heading away from Julesburg. She's looking for work. I told her you were still looking for a cook." "Mrs.?" Donnelly's eyebrows rose. "Did you now? That's awfully presumptuous of you, Owen." "Yes, madam," Owen agreed. "But I thought you'd want to at least meet her. She's had a hard time of it, and she needs a fresh start. And we really do need a cook." The older woman studied Josephine for a long moment, taking in her worn clothes, her bruised face, her exhaustion. When she spoke, her voice was firm, but not unkind. "Well, come inside then, Miss Rothwell. Let's have a conversation." Josephine followed Mrs. Donnelly into the house, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. The interior was clean and well-furnished, practical rather than fancy, but comfortable. They sat in a parlor with windows that looked out over the ranch. "So, Mrs., Donnelly said, getting straight to the point. "Tell me why you left Julesburg and why I should hire you." Josephine took a breath and decided on honesty. 3 young men, one of them the son of the richest man in town, cornered my 13-year-old sister yesterday. They were going to assault her. I stopped them. I broke the ringleader's nose and gave him 2 black eyes. His father gave my father an ultimatum. I leave town, or they destroy us financially. My father chose to save himself. So here I am. Mrs. Donnelly's expression didn't change. Can you prove any of this? No, Josephine said. It's just my word, but I'm not lying. I don't think you are, Mrs. Donnelly said. I've known the Whitfields for years. Virgil is a ruthless bastard, and his son Marcus is worse. Boy's had everything handed to him his whole life, and thinks he can take whatever he wants. Josephine stared at her. You know them? I know of them, Mrs. Donnelly corrected. They tried to buy my land after my husband died. When I refused to sell, they tried to drive me out. Didn't work. I've got good men working for me, and I'm not easily intimidated. But I know what they're capable of. She leaned forward. That took guts, what you did. Stupid maybe, but gutsy. Your sister all right? Physically, yes, Josephine said. But she's alone with my father now, and I'm worried about her. Understandable, Mrs. Donnelly said. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. Here's my offer. You work as cook for the Rocking Eye. $30 a month plus room and board. Your room will be upstairs in this house. You'll cook breakfast and dinner for about 25 men every day, sometimes more during busy seasons. You'll keep the kitchen clean and make a list of supplies we need when we go to town. In return, I expect hard work, honesty, and discretion. I don't tolerate gossip, laziness, or drama. You have a problem with someone, you come to me. You understand? Yes, madam, Josephine said. Good. You can start tomorrow. Today you'll rest and get settled. Rosa will show you your room and help you get oriented. Fair? More than fair, Josephine said, relief flooding through her. Thank you, Mrs. Donnelly. I won't let you down. See that you don't, Mrs. Donnelly said, but there was a hint of warmth in her stern expression. And Miss Rothwell, what you did for your sister, defending her like that speaks well of your character. I like people who stand up for what's right, even when it costs them. Josephine felt tears prick her eyes again, but blinked them back. Thank you. Mrs. Donnelly stood and called out, Rosa, come meet our new cook. A plump Mexican woman with a kind face appeared from the back of the house. Mrs. Donnelly made introductions, and Rosa immediately took Josephine under her wing, clucking sympathetically over her bruised face and leading her upstairs to a small but clean room with a real bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the prairie. You rest now, Rosa said in heavily accented English. I bring you water for washing and some food. Tonight you eat with us in the kitchen, get to know things. Tomorrow you start work, yes? Yes, Josephine agreed. Thank you, Rosa. When she was alone, Josephine sank onto the bed and looked around her new room. It wasn't much, but it was hers, a place where no one could throw her out, where she could earn her keep and save money for Lily. It was a start. More than that, it was hope. She thought of Owen Irwin, of his kind eyes and his words about defenders being worth protecting too. She'd thanked him before Mrs. Donnelly had taken her into the house, but it seemed inadequate for what he'd done. He'd saved her, really, given her a chance when she'd had none. That evening, as promised, she ate in the kitchen with Rosa and Mrs. Donnelly. They talked about the routine of the ranch, what the men liked to eat, how supplies were managed. Mrs. Donnelly was all business but not unkind, and Rosa was warm and welcoming. After dinner, exhausted beyond measure, Josephine retreated to her room and fell into bed. She woke before dawn, her body clock attuned to early rising after years of running her father's household. She dressed quickly in her least-worn dress and made her way downstairs. Rosa was already in the kitchen, lighting the massive stove. You are early, Rosa said approvingly. Good. The men, they like to eat before sun is up. We have much work. Together they prepared breakfast for the hands. Biscuits, bacon, eggs, gravy, and gallons of coffee. It was more food than Josephine had ever cooked at once, but she fell into the rhythm of it with Rosa's help. As the sun painted the horizon pink, the men began filing into the cookhouse, a separate building adjacent to the main house where they took their meals. Josephine stayed in the kitchen, suddenly nervous about facing so many strange men. But Rosa insisted she come out to serve, saying the men needed to know who their new cook was. Taking a deep breath, Josephine carried out platters of food. The cookhouse fell quiet as the men noticed her. 25 pairs of eyes stared, some curious, some wary, a few openly appreciative. Then Owen stood up from where he'd been sitting near the end of one long table. "Fellows, this is Miss Josephine Rothwell, our new cook. I expect you all to treat her with respect and courtesy. Anyone who doesn't will answer to me first and Mrs. Donnelly second. We clear?" There was a chorus of "Yes, sir," and "Understood" from the assembled men. Owen's voice had held steel beneath the polite words, making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. He caught Josephine's eye and gave her a small nod of encouragement. "Morning, Miss Rothwell," Chuck called out cheerfully. "Food smells a sight better than what we've been choking down. Welcome to the Rocking Eye." That broke the tension, and several other men called out greetings. Josephine found herself relaxing slightly. These were working men, rough around the edges perhaps, but not threatening, and Owen had made it clear she was under his protection, which seemed to mean something to the others. She served the food and retreated to the kitchen, where she and Rosa tackled the massive pile of dishes. As they worked, Rosa chatted about the various men who worked the ranch, giving Josephine a sense of personalities and dynamics. "Owen, he is good man," Rosa said. "Very good man. The other men, they respect him. He is strong, but also kind. Not like some cowboys who think being tough means being mean. You understand?" "I understand," Josephine said, thinking of Marcus Whitfield and his friends. The days settled into a pattern. Josephine rose before dawn, cooked breakfast, cleaned up, spent the middle of the day preparing for dinner and doing other kitchen work, then cooked dinner and cleaned up again. It was exhausting work, but satisfying in a way her life in Julesburg never had been. Here she was, valued for her skills, paid fairly, and treated with respect. The men of the Rocking Eye turned out to be decent sorts by and large. They were careful around her, polite, quick to thank her for good meals. A few of the younger ones tried awkward flirtation until Owen had a quiet word with them, after which they treated her like a sister instead. Chuck became something of a friend, always ready with a joke or a funny story from his many years as a cowboy. Mateo was quieter but kind, often bringing her wildflowers he'd found on the range with a shy smile. And Owen. Owen was there at breakfast and dinner every day, always ready with a word of greeting or a compliment on the food. He never pushed himself on her, never presumed on their acquaintance, but his presence was steady and comforting. She found herself looking for him in the cookhouse, noticed when he was absent for meals because he was working far from the main ranch. About 2 weeks after her arrival, Owen caught her after dinner as she was returning to the main house. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. "Miss Josephine," he said, removing his hat. "Do you have a moment?" "Of course," she said, curious. "What can I do for you?" "I was wondering if you might like to take a walk," he said. "It's a nice evening, and I thought you might enjoy seeing more of the ranch. You've been working so hard, you haven't had much chance to explore." Josephine hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, but another part warned her about getting too close to Owen Irwin. He made her feel things she hadn't felt before, things that scared her with their intensity. "I don't think that would be appropriate," she said finally. Owen's face fell slightly, but he nodded. "I understand. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I just thought, well, I consider you a friend, and I hoped you might feel the same." "I do," Josephine said quickly, then felt her cheeks heat. "Feel the same, I mean. You've been very kind to me, but I need to be careful about my reputation. I can't afford any gossip." "You're right," Owen said. "I wasn't thinking. I apologize." He started to turn away, but Josephine found herself saying, "Wait, maybe we could walk around the yard, where we could be seen. That would be proper enough, wouldn't it?" Owen's face brightened. "That would be fine. More than fine." They walked slowly around the perimeter of the main buildings, careful to stay in sight of the bunkhouse and other areas where people might see them. It was just proper enough to avoid scandal, but private enough to talk. "How are you settling in?" Owen asked. "Really, I mean, not just the polite answer." "It's good," Josephine said honestly. "Better than I expected. The work is hard, but I don't mind that. Mrs. Donnelly is fair and Rosa is wonderful. The men are respectful. I feel safe here." "Good," Owen said. "You deserve to feel safe." They walked in silence for a moment. Then Josephine said, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you help me that day? Really? You said defenders are worth protecting, but there's more to it than that, isn't there?" Owen was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he said, I had a sister, younger than me by 5 years. Her name was Olivia. Had? Josephine asked softly. She died when she was 16, Owen said, his voice rough with old pain. There was a man in our town, son of someone important, same as your situation. He took a liking to Olivia. She wasn't interested. He didn't care. One night he cornered her when she was walking home from church. She fought him, hard as she could, but he was stronger. He hurt her bad, physically and other ways. Josephine felt sick. Owen, I'm so sorry. She was never the same after, Owen continued. Got quiet, stopped smiling. 6 months later she took my father's gun and walked out into the fields. We found her the next morning. He stopped walking, his fists clenched at his sides. The man who hurt her never faced any consequences. His father made sure of that. Money and influence bought his freedom, just like it almost bought yours. The difference was, no one defended Olivia. She was alone, and it destroyed her. So when you saw me, Josephine said, understanding flooding through her. When I saw you, I saw someone who'd done what I wished I could have done for my sister, Owen said. Someone who fought back, someone who defended the innocent and paid a price for it. I couldn't help Olivia, but I could help you. I had to help you. Josephine reached out without thinking and took his hand. Thank you, she said, for telling me, and for everything you did. Owen looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. In the fading light, his eyes were dark and intense. You remind me of her sometimes. Olivia, I mean. Your strength, your courage. But you're different too. You survived. You're fighting to build a new life. That matters more than you know. I'm fighting for my sister, Josephine corrected. Everything I do is so I can save enough money to get Lily out of Julesburg, to give her a chance at something better. That's what makes you special, Owen said quietly. You think of others before yourself. That's rare, Josephine. He'd used her first name without the miss, she realized. It should have felt presumptuous, but instead it felt natural, right? She liked the way it sounded in his deep voice. You can call me Josie, she heard herself say. My mother and sister always called me that. Owen smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. Josie, I like it. And you should call me Owen. Just Owen. Just Owen, she repeated, finding herself smiling back. They stood there in the gathering dusk, hands still joined, and something shifted between them, something that had been building since that first day on the road. Josephine felt it like a physical force, pulling her toward this man who'd saved her, who understood her, who looked at her like she mattered. I should get inside, she said reluctantly. Early morning tomorrow? Every morning, Owen agreed, but he didn't let go of her hand immediately. Josie, I know this is probably not the right time, and I don't want to rush you or make you uncomfortable, but I need you to know something. What? She asked, her heart beating faster. I care about you, Owen said simply. More than I probably should, given we've only known each other 2 weeks. But there it is. I care about you, and I want to spend more time with you, get to know you better, if you're willing. Josephine knew she should be cautious, knew she should protect her heart, focus on saving money for Lily, not get distracted by a handsome cowboy with kind eyes and a tragic past. But standing there with her hand in his, she couldn't make herself pull away. I'd like that, she said softly. I care about you too, Owen. You've been so good to me. Then let's see where this goes, Owen said. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people getting to know each other. Is that all right? That's all right, Josie agreed. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so sweet and old-fashioned that it made her breath catch. Then he released her and stepped back. Good night, Josie, he said. Good night, Owen, she replied. She walked back to the main house, feeling like her feet barely touched the ground. Inside, Rosa was sitting in the kitchen mending clothes, and she looked up with knowing eyes. You like him, yes? Rosa said with a smile. Owen, he is good man for you. I barely know him, Josie protested weakly. You know enough, Rosa said wisely. Sometimes the heart knows before the head catches up. Over the next weeks, Josie and Owen began a tentative courtship. They walked together most evenings when his work allowed, always properly, always where others could see. They talked about everything, their pasts, their hopes, their dreams. Owen told her about Texas and his family, about learning to be a cowboy, about the places he'd seen. Josie told him about her mother, about raising Lily, about the small joys and large sorrows of her life in Julesburg. She found herself opening up to him in ways she never had with anyone. He was easy to talk to, a good listener who asked thoughtful questions and really seemed to care about her answers. And slowly, carefully, she began to trust him with her heart. Mrs. Donnelly noticed, of course. The older woman didn't miss much. One afternoon she called Josie into her office, and Josie went nervously, wondering if she was about to be told that fraternization with the hands was forbidden. Instead, Mrs. Donnelly said, "Owen's a good man, one of the best I've ever known. If you two are developing feelings for each other, I won't stand in your way." "Mrs. Donnelly, I assure you we've been completely proper," Josie said quickly. "I know you have," Mrs. Donnelly said. "That's not what concerns me. What concerns me is that you know what you're getting into. Being with a cowboy, even a good one like Owen, it's not easy. The work is dangerous. The pay could be better. It's a hard life." "I come from a hard life," Josie said. "I'm not afraid of that." "No, I don't suppose you are," Mrs. Donnelly said. "Just be careful with your heart, Josephine, and make sure Owen is careful with it too. You've been through enough already." "Thank you," Josie said, touched by the older woman's concern. "I will." Summer deepened into fall. The work of the ranch continued with the rhythm of the seasons. Josie proved herself an excellent cook, and the men of the rocking. I made sure she knew how much they appreciated her. More than once she overheard them saying she was the best cook the ranch had ever had. She wrote to Lily every week, careful letters that she sent to the general store in Julesburg, with instructions for the proprietor to give them to her sister. She didn't know if Lily was getting them, had no way to know if her father was intercepting the mail, but she kept writing anyway. Each letter included a little money, $5 here, $3 there, whatever she could spare from her wages after setting aside the bulk for Lily's eventual rescue. In October, Chuck and two other hands went to town for supplies. They returned with news that made Josie's blood run cold. "There's talk in Julesburg," Chuck said, finding her in the kitchen. "About your sister. Thought you should know." Josie's hands stilled on the bread dough she'd been kneading. "What kind of talk?" "Your father's been trying to marry her off," Chuck said gently. "She's just turned 14, and he's looking for a husband for her. Marcus Whitfield's making noises about being interested." The room spun. Josie gripped the edge of the work table, her knuckles white. No, he can't. She's just a child." "I know," Chuck said, "but your father's desperate for money, and the Whitfields have plenty of it. Word is they're negotiating." Josie yanked off her apron and headed for the door. She had to do something, had to stop this. Chuck caught her arm gently. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To Julesburg," Josie said. "I have to get Lily out of there." "And do what?" Chuck asked reasonably. "March in and take her? Your father won't let you. The sheriff's in Whitfield's pocket. You'll just end up hurt, or worse." "I can't just let this happen," Josie cried, tears streaming down her face. "You won't," said a voice from the doorway. Owen stood there, his expression grim. "But we need a plan, a real one, not just rushing in blind." He came over and gently guided Josie to a chair. She sat, her mind racing with terrible images of Lily married to Marcus Whitfield, that cruel boy who'd tried to hurt her, who would hurt her, over and over for the rest of her life. "I need to think," Owen said, pacing. "There has to be a way, some legal recourse." "There isn't," Josie said bitterly. "Fathers have the right to arrange their daughters' marriages, especially at that age. No judge will stop it." "Then we don't go through the law," Owen said. "We go around it." Josie looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "We take her," Owen said simply. "We go in, we get her, and we bring her here. Mrs. Donnelly will support us. She hates the Whitfields as much as anyone." "They'd come after us," Josie said. "My father, the Whitfields, maybe even the law." "Let them come," Owen said, his voice hard. "This is wrong and you know it. That child needs to be protected, and if her own father won't do it, we will." Chuck nodded. "Owen's right. This ain't sitting well with me either. Girl that age married to a weasel like Marcus Whitfield? That's not right. I'll help." "Me too," said Mateo, who'd appeared in the doorway. "We do this together." Josie looked between the three men, overwhelmed by their support. "You'd risk yourselves for a girl you've never met?" "We'd risk ourselves for you," Owen corrected. "And for what's right. That's all the reason we need." They spent the rest of the day planning. Mrs. Donnelly, when informed of the situation, was immediately on board. She knew people in Denver, lawyers who might be able to help, and she sent telegrams making inquiries. In the meantime, they developed a plan to retrieve Lily from Julesburg. It was decided that Josie, Owen, Chuck, and Mateo would ride to Julesburg under cover of darkness. They'd approach the Rothwell house quietly, get Lily's attention, and spirit her away before anyone knew what was happening. It was risky and probably illegal, but as Owen pointed out, sometimes the law and justice weren't the same thing. They left 2 days later, as soon as Mrs. Donnelly received a response from Denver, confirming that her lawyer friend would take on Lily's case if needed. The four of them rode hard, covering the distance to Julesburg in just over 6 hours. They arrived after midnight, the town dark and quiet. Josie's heart pounded as they approached her father's house. She hadn't been back since the day he threw her out. The house looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier. One of the shutters hung loose and the porch sagged. They tied their horses a distance away and crept close on foot. Josie led them to the window of the room she used to share with Lily. The window was open a crack for the cool night air. She tapped gently on the glass, then whispered, "Lily? Lily? It's me. It's Josie." There was movement inside, then the window slid open further. Lily's face appeared, pale in the moonlight. Her eyes went wide. "Josie," she whispered, "is it really you?" "It's me, little bird," Josie said, tears already streaming down her face. "I've come to get you. You're not marrying Marcus Whitfield. You're not staying here. You're coming with me." "Papa says I have to," Lily said, her voice breaking. "He says it's all arranged. 2 weeks from now. He says Marcus will take care of me." "Marcus will hurt you," Josie said flatly. "You know what he tried to do. He hasn't changed. If anything, he's worse because he thinks he bought the right to do whatever he wants to you. I won't let that happen." "I don't want to marry him," Lily sobbed. "I'm so scared, Josie." "Then come with us," Josie urged. "Right now. Climb out the window. We have horses. We'll take you somewhere safe." "Papa will come after me," Lily said. "Let him try," Owen said, speaking for the first time. "You must be Lily. I'm Owen Irwin. I work with your sister. We're here to help you, all of us. But you need to decide right now. Are you coming?" Lily looked at her sister, then at the determined faces of the 3 men behind her. She nodded. "I'm coming." She disappeared from the window and reappeared a moment later with a small bag. Owen lifted her down easily, and then they were running, as quietly as they could, back to where they'd left the horses. Lily rode with Josie, and they took off at a gallop, putting distance between themselves and Julesburg. They rode through what remained of the night and into the dawn, only stopping to rest the horses when absolutely necessary. Lily clung to Josie, crying and laughing in equal measure. When they finally paused at a stream to let the horses drink and catch their breath, Lily threw her arms around her sister. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you for coming back. I knew you would. I knew you wouldn't leave me there." "Never," Josie said fiercely. "I will always come for you. Always." They made it back to the Rocking Wine by late afternoon, exhausted but triumphant. Mrs. Donnelly came out to meet them, took one look at Lily, and immediately took charge. "Poor child," she said. "Come inside. Rosa will draw you a bath and get you some food. You're safe now." Over the next few days, Lily settled into life at the ranch. She was shy at first, overwhelmed by all the new people and the changes, but Rosa and Mrs. Donnelly both doted on her. And the men of the Rocking, I treated her like a precious little sister, protective and kind. Josie was happier than she'd been since her mother died. Having Lily safe and close, being able to see her every day, it healed something broken inside her. She and Owen continued their courtship, and Lily approved wholeheartedly. "He's good," she told Josie one evening as they sat on the porch of the main house. "Owen, he's really good, Josie. I can see how he looks at you. Like, you're the most important person in the world." "He makes me feel that way," Josie admitted. "I'm falling in love with him, Lily. Is that crazy? We've only known each other a few months." "Mama always said when you know," Lily said. "And I think you know." "I think I do," Josie agreed. But their peace was short-lived. 2 weeks after Lily's rescue, a group of riders approached the ranch. Josie was in the cookhouse preparing dinner when Chuck burst in. "Trouble coming," he said tersely. "Your father and the Whitfields and the sheriff from Julesburg half a dozen of them. They're demanding Lily back. Josie's blood ran cold. Where is she? In the main house with Mrs. Donnelly, Chuck said. Owen says to stay put. He's handling it. But Josie couldn't stay put. This was her fault, her responsibility. She ran out of the cookhouse and across the yard to where Owen, Mateo, and several other hands were standing in a line, facing down the riders from Julesburg. Her father sat on a horse, looking older and more haggard than she remembered. Beside him was Virgil Whitfield, a hard-faced man with cold eyes, and his son, Marcus, whose nose had healed crookedly from where Josie had broken it. Sheriff Crawford sat on his horse, looking uncomfortable, and 3 other men completed the group. We're here for the girl, Virgil Whitfield announced. Lily Rothwell. Her father says she was kidnapped from her home. We're taking her back. No one was kidnapped, Owen said calmly. Lily chose to leave. She's 14 years old, and she didn't want to be forced into a marriage she didn't consent to. She's a child, Virgil Whitfield said. She doesn't get to make those choices. Her father does. And he's arranged for her to marry my son. It's legal, and it's binding. It's not binding until there's a wedding, Mrs. Donnelly said, stepping out of the house. And there won't be a wedding. That child is staying here under my protection. You have no right, Josie's father said, finding his voice. She's my daughter. I have the legal authority to make decisions for her. You gave up that right when you tried to sell her to a man who assaulted her, Josie said, stepping forward despite Owen's warning hand on her arm. You gave up that right when you cared more about money than about her safety and happiness. You, her father said, his face twisting with rage. This is all your fault. Everything was fine until you interfered, until you attacked Marcus and turned everyone against us. Everything was fine, Josie repeated incredulously. Marcus and his friends were trying to rape Lily. How is that fine? That's a lie, Marcus Whitfield said, but his eyes were shifty. She wanted it. She was flirting with us. She was 13 years old, you disgusting coward. Josie spat. And you're a liar. Everyone knows what you are, what you've done to other girls in town. Everyone's just too afraid of your father's money to say anything. That's enough, Sheriff Crawford said uncomfortably. Look, Miss Rothwell, I understand you're trying to protect your sister, but the law's the law. Your father has the right to custody. If you don't turn Lily over, I'll have to arrest you for kidnapping. Then you'll have to arrest all of us, Owen said. All along the line, his fellow ranch hands nodded. Because we all helped, and Mrs. Donnelly sanctioned it. You want to arrest a dozen people for saving a child from being forced into marriage with a known predator? Go ahead. See how that plays in the newspapers. Newspapers, Virgil Whitfield said sharply. Oh, yes, Mrs. Donnelly said with a cold smile. I have friends at the Denver Post. They'd be very interested in this story. Rich, powerful family trying to force a 14-year-old girl into marriage. The violence and intimidation used to silence anyone who objects. That would make fascinating reading, don't you think? Virgil Whitfield's face turned an ugly shade of red. You're threatening me? I'm promising you, Mrs. Donnelly said. You try to take that child, and I'll make sure everyone in Colorado knows what kind of man you are, what kind of son you raised. Your reputation will be destroyed. There was a tense moment of silence. Then Marcus Whitfield said, She's not even that pretty, Father. Not worth all this trouble. Let her rot here. Virgil Whitfield looked like he wanted to argue, but he was smart enough to know when he was beaten. This isn't over, he said. Girl's still legally her father's responsibility. He could take this to court. He could, Mrs. Donnelly agreed. And he'd lose. I have lawyers in Denver who would be happy to argue that a father who tries to force his underage daughter into marriage with a violent predator is unfit. We could make this very public and very ugly. Or you could all just ride back to Julesburg and forget the Rothwell girls exist. Your choice. Josie's father looked at her, and for a moment, something like regret crossed his face. Then it was gone. She was always more trouble than she was worth, he said. Keep her. Keep both of them. I wash my hands of this family. He wheeled his horse around and rode away without looking back. The Whitfields and the sheriff followed, though Virgil shot Mrs. Donnelly a look that promised this wasn't truly over. When they were gone, Josie's legs gave out. Owen caught her before she could fall, holding her steady. It's all right, he murmured. They're gone. You're safe. Lily's safe. My father, Josie said, her voice breaking. He just rode away, disowned us both. Then he's a fool, Owen said firmly, "and you're better off without him." Mrs. Donnelly came over and put a hand on Josie's shoulder. "He gave up all parental rights in front of witnesses. That actually makes things easier legally. Lily can stay here as my ward until she's old enough to make her own choices. The Whitfields won't risk a scandal by pushing further. You won, Josephine. Both of you are free." Free. The word seemed impossible. But standing there in Owen's arms, with Lily safe inside the house and the people of the Rocking Y surrounding them in support, Josie realized it was true. They were free. Free from Julesburg, from their father, from the Whitfields, and their threats. She started to cry, great heaving sobs of relief and grief and joy all mixed together. Owen held her through it, steady and strong, while the others tactfully dispersed to give them privacy. When she finally calmed down, Owen tilted her face up to look at him. "I love you, Josie," he said quietly. "I've loved you since that first day on the road, if I'm honest. You're the strongest, bravest, most amazing woman I've ever met. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life with you, protecting you, supporting you, loving you." Josie stared at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Owen, I love you too, so much." He kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a promise of all the kisses to come. When they finally pulled apart, Lily was standing on the porch with Mrs. Donnelly and Rosa, all three of them grinning. "About time," Lily called out. "I was wondering when you two would finally admit it." Everyone laughed, and the tension of the confrontation dissolved into celebration. That night there was a special dinner, and Owen formally asked Mrs. Donnelly's permission to court Josie properly with the intention of marriage. Mrs. Donnelly gave her blessing, as did Lily, though she teased them mercilessly about being sappy and romantic. Over the winter months, Owen and Josie's relationship deepened. They spent every free moment together, talking, laughing, planning their future. Owen was patient and respectful, never pushing for more than Josie was ready to give, but making it clear through 1,000 small gestures how much he adored her. In February, on the 6-month anniversary of the day they met, Owen took Josie for a ride out onto the prairie. It was a cold but clear day, the kind where the sky seemed to go on forever. They stopped at a spot overlooking the ranch, and Owen dismounted and helped Josie down. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a simple gold ring with a small stone. "It was my mother's, the only thing I have from her. I'd like you to have it, if you'll marry me, that is." Josie looked at the ring, then at Owen's hopeful, nervous face. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, of course I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her close and kissed her. And Josie felt like she was home, really, truly home for the first time in her life. They were married in April, a simple ceremony in the ranch's small chapel, with everyone from the Rocking Y in attendance. Lily stood up with Josie, and Chuck stood with Owen. Mrs. Donnelly gave Josie away, and there wasn't a dry eye in the place when they exchanged vows. Josie wore a dress that Rosa had helped her make, simple but beautiful, and she felt like a princess. Owen wore a new suit that made him look devastatingly handsome, but it was the look in his eyes as he watched her walk down the aisle that made her breath catch. He looked at her like she was his entire world. "I, Owen Irwin, take you, Josephine Rothwell, to be my wife," he said when the time came. "I promise to love you, defend you, support you, and stand by you for all the days of my life. You are my heart and my home, and I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you." Josie's voice shook as she repeated her own vows. "I, Josephine Rothwell, take you, Owen Irwin, to be my husband. I promise to love you, trust you, stand with you, and build a life with you. You save me in every way a person can be saved, and I will love you for that and for who you are until my last breath." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and whistles of the assembled crowd. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, and Josie had never been happier. Mrs. Donnelly had given them a small house on the ranch property as a wedding gift, a 2-room cabin that was cozy and private. They spent their wedding night there, and Owen was gentle and patient, making sure Josie felt safe and cherished. It was everything she'd hoped it would be and more. The years that followed were good ones. Josie continued to cook for the ranch, though once she got pregnant with their first child, Mrs. Donnelly hired someone to help her, so she wouldn't overwork herself. Owen proved to be as good a husband as he had promised, attentive and loving and endlessly supportive. Their first child, a boy they named James after Owen's father, was born in the spring of 1880. He was healthy and loud and perfect. Lily, now 16, doted on her nephew and proved to be a wonderful aunt. She'd bloomed at the ranch, growing from a frightened girl into a confident young woman. She was helping Mrs. Donnelly with the ranch's books now, showing a real talent for numbers and management. 2 years later, Josie gave birth to a daughter they named Eleanor after Josie's mother, and 2 years after that, another son named Thomas. Their little cabin got crowded, so Owen and some of the other hands built them a larger house, 4 rooms with a real porch and a yard where the children could play. Lily eventually married one of the ranch hands, a gentle man named Samuel, who treated her like precious china and made her laugh. They had their own children, and the two families were as close could be, raising their kids together, sharing meals and holidays and life. The Whitfields never bothered them again. Virgil died a few years after that confrontation at the ranch, and Marcus, without his father's protection and money, turned out to be a coward who drank himself to death before he was 30. Josie felt no satisfaction in hearing of their deaths, only sadness that they'd wasted their lives on cruelty and greed. Her father she never heard from again. She'd made peace with that, eventually. Some wounds couldn't be healed, and some people couldn't be forgiven. But she had Owen and Lily and their growing families, and that was enough. More than enough. Mrs. Donnelly lived to be nearly 80, sharp and commanding until the end. When she died, she left the ranch to be split equally between Owen and 3 other longtime hands who'd proved themselves over the years. Owen threw himself into the work of managing his portion of the ranch, and proved to be as good at it as he was at everything else. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen and Josie took a rare day off and rode out to that spot overlooking the ranch where he'd proposed. Their 3 children were being watched by Lily and Samuel, giving them precious time alone. They sat on a blanket watching the sunset. Josie nestled against Owen's side, his arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking in a stray woman on the road that day, everything that came after?" Owen looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Regret you? Regret our life together? Josie, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. That day I found you on the road. That was the day my real life started. Everything before was just waiting for you." "I feel the same way," Josie said softly. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped, if you'd just ridden past. I'd probably be dead in a ditch somewhere, or worse. You saved my life, Owen. You and your kindness and your belief that defenders are worth protecting too." "We saved each other," Owen corrected. "You gave me a reason to heal from my past, a reason to hope, a family to love. I'm the one who should be grateful." "Then we'll both be grateful," Josie said, tilting her face up to kiss him. "Grateful for each other, for this life we've built, for everything." They sat there as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and purple. 2 people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd fought for what was right and built something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts. Inside their house, their children played and laughed. On the ranch, the cattle lowed and the horses nickered, and life went on in its steady rhythm. And in each other's arms, Owen and Josie knew they were home. Not just in a place, but in each other, partners, defenders, lovers, friends. The years continued to roll by, marked by the seasons and the cycles of ranch life. Josie and Owen grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. Their children grew tall and strong, and eventually gave them grandchildren who ran wild across the ranch property, just as their parents had before them. James, their eldest, proved to have his father's way with horses and his mother's determination. He took over more and more of the ranch operations as Owen's joints began to ache with age. Eleanor became a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch for all the children in the area. Thomas followed in his Aunt Lily's footsteps and showed a talent for business, eventually handling all the ranch's financial affairs. Lily and Samuel had 4 children of their own, and the 2 families were so intertwined that sometimes it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Sunday dinners at the main house, which Josie still hosted even in her 60s, regularly included 20 or more people, all laughing and talking and eating until they couldn't move. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the grandchildren were asleep, Josie and Owen would sit on their porch and watch the stars come out. Owen's hair had gone silver, and Josie's auburn had faded to a soft gray. But when he looked at her, his eyes still held the same love they had the first day. "Tell me the story again," their youngest granddaughter asked one evening when she was sleeping over. She was 7 years old and precocious, already showing signs of having her grandmother's spine and her grandfather's heart. "What story, little one?" Josie asked, settling the girl on her lap despite her own protesting knees. "The story of how you and Grandpa fell in love," the girl said. "It's my favorite." Owen chuckled. "Your grandmother might be tired of that story, sweetheart." "Never," Josie said firmly. "Well, it all started when I defended my sister. I was cast out from my town for standing up for what was right. I thought my life was over. I was walking down a dusty road with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. And then Grandpa found you," the granddaughter said excitedly, even though she'd heard this story dozens of times. "And then I found her," Owen agreed, reaching over to take Josie's free hand. "The most beautiful, bravest woman I'd ever seen. I told her that defenders are worth protecting too, and I meant it. And then you fell in love and got married and had babies and lived happily ever after," the granddaughter finished with satisfaction. "That's exactly right," Josie said, kissing the top of the girl's head. "We lived happily ever after, because sometimes when you fight for what's right, good things happen. And sometimes when you meet the right person, they'll stand beside you no matter what." "I want to fall in love like that someday," the granddaughter said sleepily. "You will, if you're lucky," Owen said, "and if you remember to be brave and kind, just like your grandmother." They put the girl to bed in the spare room, and then Josie and Owen returned to their porch. The night was clear and cool, perfect for sitting outside. "Do you think we did right by them?" Josie asked, as she sometimes did. "The children and grandchildren. Did we give them what they needed?" "We gave them love," Owen said simply. "And we showed them what it means to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. What more could they need?" "Nothing, I suppose," Josie said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I'm so grateful, Owen. For all of it. For you." "And I'm grateful for you," Owen replied. "Every single day." They sat there in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other when they both needed saving, who'd built a life together based on love and respect and the fierce determination to protect what mattered. They'd faced down bullies and poverty and doubt, and they'd won. Not just survived, but thrived. Inside the house, their granddaughter slept peacefully, dreaming of her own future adventures and loves. On the ranch, the cattle and horses rested for the night. The wind whispered through the prairie grass, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. And on the porch of the house they'd built together, Josephine and Owen Irwin held hands and watched the stars, content in the knowledge that they'd lived a good life, a life worth living, a life built on the simple truth that defenders are worth protecting too, and that love, real love, can heal even the deepest wounds. As the years advanced, both Josie and Owen slowed down, as all people must. Their children took over more and more of the daily work, but both Josie and Owen remained active and involved, offering advice and wisdom gained from decades of experience. When Owen was 72 and Josie was 68, they took one last ride out to that special spot overlooking the ranch. It took them longer than it used to, and they had to stop to rest more often, but they made it. "Remember when I proposed to you here?" Owen asked, his voice rougher with age but still warm. "I remember everything about that day," Josie said. "How nervous you were, how the ring fit perfectly, how I felt like the luckiest woman alive." "I was the lucky one," Owen insisted, as he had 1,000 times before. "Finding you, loving you, building this life with you, that was my greatest adventure." "Mine too," Josie agreed. "You know, I used to be so angry at my father for throwing me out, so hurt. But now I realize that if he hadn't, I never would have met you. I never would have had this life. So maybe, in a strange way, I should thank him." "I wouldn't go that far," Owen said dryly. "The man was still a coward and a fool, but I see what you mean. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best things." They sat there for a long time, holding hands and remembering that first meeting on the dusty road, their wedding, the births of their children, the everyday moments that made up a life well lived, the laughter and tears, the triumphs and struggles, all of it woven together into something beautiful and strong. When they finally rode back to the ranch, the sun was setting once again, and their entire family was waiting for them. A surprise party for their 50th wedding anniversary, organized by their children and grandchildren. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. Josie and Owen were pulled into the celebration, surrounded by love and laughter. They danced together, moving slowly to accommodate old bones and tired muscles, but moving together still, as they always had. 50 years, Owen said softly as they swayed to the music, and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. So would I, Josie said, tears in her eyes. So would I, my love. The party went on late into the night, and when it was finally over and everyone had gone home or to bed, Josie and Owen sat on their porch one more time. The stars blazed overhead, countless and eternal, just as they had all those years ago. I love you, Josephine Irwin, Owen said. I have loved you since the day I met you, and I will love you beyond my last breath. And I love you, Owen Irwin, Josie replied. You are my heart and my home. You are my everything. They sat there in the peaceful darkness, content in each other's presence, knowing that whatever time they had left, they would spend it together, just as they always had, just as they always would. The story of the woman who was cast out for defending her younger sister, and the cowboy who said defenders are worth protecting too, was not just a story of how they met. It was the story of a love that endured through hardship and triumph, that grew stronger with each passing year, that created a legacy of family and love that would continue for generations. It was the story of two people who saved each other, who stood together against the world, who built something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts. It was a story with a happy ending, not because everything was perfect, but because they had each other, and that was enough. Years later, when they were both gone and their grandchildren had become grandparents themselves, the story was still told. The legend of Josie and Owen, the defender and the cowboy, who'd found love in the Wild West and proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments. Their house still stood on the ranch, occupied now by their great-great-grandchildren. The ranch itself still thrived, passed down through the family, a testament to the foundation Owen and Josie had helped build. And on quiet evenings when the work was done and the stars came out, their descendants would sit on porches all across the ranch and tell the story. The story of how love conquers all, how standing up for what's right matters, how defenders are always worth protecting, and how sometimes the people we meet in our darkest moments turn out to be the light that guides us home. It was a story with a happy ending, a story of love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, a story that proved that even in the harsh landscape of the Wild West, even when everything seemed lost, hope and love could still bloom and flourish and create something beautiful that would last forever. Josie and Owen's legacy lived on, not just in their descendants, but in the values they'd instilled, the love they'd shown, and the example they'd set. They'd taken broken pieces and built something whole. They'd taken pain and transformed it into joy. They'd taken two lost souls and created a family that spanned generations. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, they were together still, hand in hand, heart to heart, as they always had been and always would be. Forever and always, the defender and her cowboy, proof that love really can conquer all, and that happy endings aren't just for fairy tales. Sometimes, if you're brave enough and lucky enough and willing to fight for it, they can be real too. The end of their story was not really an end at all, but a beginning that continued through every child and grandchild and great-grandchild who carried their names and their values forward into the future. It was a story that proved that one act of kindness, one moment of seeing someone who needed help and choosing to help them, could change not just 2 lives, but countless lives for generations to come. Owen had been right all those years ago on that dusty Colorado road. Defenders really are worth protecting, and Josie had proved that when you protect someone, when you love them and support them and stand beside them, you create something stronger than either of you could have been alone. Their story ended as all good stories should, with love triumphant, family thriving, and the certain knowledge that they'd lived well, loved deeply, and left the world better than they'd found it. And really, what more could anyone ask for than that?